Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be upon you all. Welcome to a special Ramadan Dhul Hijjah edition of Jummah Junction. My name is Akhtar Hussain. I'm a project engineer for systems at Network Rail, as well as a Muslims in Rail lead ambassador. Today's topic is sacrifice in the month of sacrifice. Our special guest speaker is Azim Kidwai, CEO of Mercy Mission UK. My brother Azim is a social entrepreneur at heart and has led Mercy Mission UK since 2009. He has grown the organization from a startup to being one of the most leading social impact incubators of the day. Azim's focus is in building high caliber teams to fix problems of modern civil society and works with a diverse tapestry of stakeholders to achieve change. Now, before I hand over to Brother Azim, some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the Muslims in Rail YouTube page. Please keep your mics and cameras switched off. However, you are encouraged to ask questions and topics that are relevant in the chat. Without further ado, now I'll hand over to Brother Azim.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, my brother. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Greetings and peace and blessings upon everybody joining the call. Today's topic is about sacrifice. This is a month of sacrifice. We're all watching on our TV screens. Hundreds of thousands and hopefully millions of people will descend upon the blessed city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. And this is to follow a tradition of the father of monotheism, the Prophet Abraham, and the call that he was instructed to make, which was to call the people to come to the blessed home, the Kaaba itself. And it's in this time where we'll see friends, relatives, colleagues, and maybe just people that we know online making that trip, heading out to the desert, heading out to the Grand Mosque in Mecca to fulfill those rites, that we should all be reflecting on our positions as people that are not traveling, people that are still here, people that are joining calls like this, and think, well, what do? We are told that this blessed month of Dhul Hijjah is a month of sacrifice, and it's the month in which we mark the sacrifice that Abraham was willing to make of his son Ismail. And this is why today's topic is going to just really think about where we are as people, where we have competing priorities as we go about our work, our family life, etc. And this is something to really think about, because it is a time of competing priorities. If we were to just wind the clock back just 2 years ago, and we look at how life was like in COVID, it would be something that we just can't imagine it anymore. It was 3 years ago, it was an unimaginable situation that the world would end up in such a situation whereby we wouldn't be able to see loved ones, we wouldn't be able to go to the mosque, we wouldn't be able to attend a Friday sermon. We were scared to meet one another. That was the kind of situation we're living. We were scared to meet people that we loved dearly, but we had a fear in our hearts. That was, just 2 years ago. 3 years ago, having that fear would have been, unimaginable. And now 2 years on, it seems a very, very distant past. But actually, we have lived through that time. And it's something for us to really think about and reflect upon our realities, that how have we learned from that time? What have we taken away? What have we understood from that human spirit that was able to get us through? And this is where our faith should really be kicking in. This is where, at a time now, we've hopefully seen, the worst of the time with COVID, and now we're in this recovery time, this post-COVID world. That what have we learned from that time? What have we learned from that time where our faith was really tested, where the number of deaths was, something that was scarring all of us? That fear was something that was overcoming our lives. And it's a good point of reflection for all of us to think, well, what are we doing with our lives? How are we using the freedom that exists for us again today to be able to go out, to go and help out local communities, to go visit local mosques, to attend the Friday prayers, for example, later on this afternoon, and actually just make good use of all the faculties that we have come so used to. Because in this time of competing priorities, often, unfortunately, we fail to see what is important and what is relevant, even though just 2 years ago, we were given a very stark reminder. There's a wonderful tradition that we're shared of the noble companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of Bilal, one of his close companions, one of his close friends, who spent some of his life as a slave. And it wasn't until he was freed by the Muslims that he was able to enjoy life as a free man. But during his time, where he was unfortunately in a state of slavery before he was emancipated, he recalls of some of the difficulties he went through. And he reflects upon this to his companions. And it was said that he was asked many a time that, how did you deal with that? And I'm sure we've all heard many a story, and we've read about this, and maybe we've told our kids about this, that the sacrifices that this great man made as being someone that was testifying to the monotheism of the day and the new chapter of God's revelation. And he says, the pain of punishment mixed with the sweetness of faith, I tasted both, and the sweetness of faith overcame everything until I felt no pain. And it's a beautiful reflection, because you see that there were the realities of, you know, living in bondage, and he was punished for accepting the monotheism of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But how did he deal with that? He said that he was able to look at the sacrifice and weigh up with what he was getting out of it, which was the sweetness of faith, the sweetness of faith. And for all of us here today, I guess that's something to think about. Do we enjoy a sweetness of faith? Is our religion something that's quite academic? Is it something that's quite, you know, ritualistic? So it's about, okay, yeah, we know we need to pray 5 times a day. We get up, we make some actions, and, you know, we walk away from them. Or actually, do we look at, for example, our prayer as something whereby this is our conversation with God? This is our moment with the divine. That even though there may be the 2 acts that are done by 2 people stood next to each other, one of them is just going through a series of, you know, rituals, you know, a standing, a bowing, a prostrating. And one of them is actually enjoying a conversation with God. One of them is actually enjoying conversation with God. And I guess maybe that's a spectrum, and most of us fit somewhere in between those 2 states. But the idea for us all to really grapple with today is that, where do we sit with any of these things? Do we actually find ourselves able to sacrifice from our day and take time out of our day to be with God, to enjoy that conversation, you know, take some value in actually being able to go through the rituals in terms of the washing and the standing and the saying of the prayers? And are we able to really find that to be an escape, to find that sweetness of faith that was mentioned by Bilal? Or are we just those people that are struggling with, you know, we've got to get 5 minutes out, or, you know what, I've attended the Jummah Junction, I'm not really gonna be able to make the Friday prayers proper. Like, where are we going to be at? So this really comes down to how we attach value to the lives that we live and what we enjoy in the lives that we are currently going through. That how are we navigating our challenges, and how are we taking on the opportunity for a conversation with the divine, for having a relationship with the divine. And one of the good ways to look at these things is that often these things will involve some level of sacrifice. They will involve some level of sacrifice whereby, you know, maybe it's a sacrifice from time in your day when it comes to your prayers. Maybe it's a sacrifice from your wealth when it comes to, say, for example, honoring the zakat, or making the sacrifice that is paid for what we know as qurbani or udhiyah. You know, you're taking money out of your wealth to spend in God's cause. Or it might be taking time out of your calendar for the year and trying to make the pilgrimage to Mecca, whatever it may be. But it's, how do you really put a value to that? And what is the value that you are putting to it? How much are you willing to invest in that relationship? A good way to look at this is just, you know, how you may do this in another context. So, for example, consider someone who's trying to lose weight. The person who's on a diet, nobody enjoys being on a diet. Nobody enjoys giving up sugar. Nobody enjoys giving up, you know, fried foods, I'm sure. But there's a value they put to that, which is the value of losing weight. Yeah, there's the value of becoming healthier, and they put the value of that higher than that slight, gap they feel in their tea not being as sweet as it used to be, or that cheesecake they really want to have, but they say, well, it's better to let that go because I'm going to lose a few pounds. Or, for example, somebody that's in a career where they have to study a lot, for example, medicine. Yeah. Someone that's studying to be a doctor, they can't enjoy 5, 6, 7, 10 years worth of study, right? But what they attach to that is the value of being a doctor and being able to assist people. So they make a sacrifice from not going out with their friends as much, not having as much money in their early years of, while they're a junior, not having the time to do, anything. Junior doctors working insane hours and being completely exhausted. But they put a value to something which is greater, which is the ability to help people and to actually become a qualified physician. So this is something we do all the time in many worldly things. And it's actually worth really taking a step back and saying, well, what do we do with that? How do we deal with that same paradigm when it comes to our faith? What are we willing to sacrifice for our faith to be better? Because faith is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the more value you'll get out of it, the stronger it's going to be. And the more, once it's stronger, the more you'll be able to taste what Bilal had mentioned, radiallahu an, earlier, where the sweetness of faith was greater than any challenge that came because of it. And really, it would be a crime not to mention this this wonderful case study we have of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, the great prophet, the Abraham, and the situation he found himself in, where he was divinely inspired to make the sacrifice. And this is a tradition that's mentioned in all the sacred scriptures, whereby Abraham was divinely inspired to make the sacrifice of his son. And this was to be an evidence of the strength of his faith and his ability to follow the commands of God. And Abraham, he was 100% aligned once he understood this to be a command from God. He was willing to make not just a sacrifice, not just like what we are offered now to make a sacrifice of a cow or a goat or a camel or whatever. He was willing for his monotheism to make the ultimate sacrifice, which was a sacrifice of his own son, the son that he loved. And he was ready immediately. Now, what's amazing here is not only was he ready, but when he went to his son, what did his son say? His son said, "Satajiduni insha'Allah ma'as sabirin," that you will find me, if God wills, to be of those steadfast. That his son also understood that the faith of his son was also of such strength, of such integrity, of such sweetness, that he was perfectly comfortable to make the ultimate sacrifice of himself as well, because it was to be as an illustration of the strength of faith to God himself. So it can't be that, in this time of marketing where you can't escape a Facebook ad, a WhatsApp message, a TV ad about making just one second, guys. Hamza, can you get them to stay quiet? Can you get them to quieten down? Apologies, guys. I'm just in a shared office. And we find that this was something of a sacrifice that was, set a standard whereby there was a real sacrifice. That's the origins of Qurbani and Udhiyah. So all those messages that you're getting, the standard that was set here was to actually make that of, the father to his son. And obviously it was God's mercy that was never going to happen. God had, used that as a test, but actually enabled Abraham to slaughter an animal, which is the practice that we follow today. But we have to ask ourselves, what is it that distracts us from doing this? God says in the Quran, "Alhaakumut takathur hatta zurtumul maqabir," that we are lost in this this desire, this haste to gather, and this is a reference to, I guess, contemporary materialism. If you've got an iPhone, whatever we're on, 12, you want a 13. If you've got a Samsung 21, you want a 22. You've got a 42-inch screen, you want a 50-inch screen. You've got a lease car that's hit 3 years and you just can't wait to get the next lease car in. It's this desire to just gather more and better. And then God says, ultimately this will all expire soon as you hit the graveyards. And that's something for us to really think about, because if we find ourselves lost in the keeping up with the Joneses or the Khans or whatever it may be, but if we find ourselves lost in this, which is very natural, because God himself has told us this, that he reminds us, al-malu wal-banuna zinatul hayat ad-dunya, that wealth and children, or wealth and sons, they are the beautification of this world. So this is the natural human state. But unless we are willing to take a step back and make sacrifice from that desire that just doesn't end, we'll find ourselves always lost, always just hunting, wanting more and more and more, but never actually finding that ultimate satisfaction. And for us in this blessed month of Dhul Hijjah, these 10 days, which are seen to be the most blessed of all days, it's a really good time to take a step back and thinking, well, where am I at with that? Am I someone that's actually always just lost in, the latest material gain, phone, house, holiday, whatever it needs to be? Or am I someone that can be from those people that think and reflect and think, well, in all truth, maybe there's something bigger than that. Maybe there's sacrifices I could make from my own desires, which would allow me to be a better person and serve people that are in a much more needy circumstance. Or maybe I can make a sacrifice which would allow other people to flourish more than this particular phone or holiday or whatever material thing that distracts us these days. And it's in that, there's a wonderful tradition of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ for us to consider, in which we are told, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he said, take advantage of 5 before 5, your youth before your old age, your health before your illness, your riches before your poverty, your free time before your work, and your life before your death. A very simple but comprehensive instruction about just taking stock. We're reminded of 5 things here, youth before old age, health before sickness, richness before poverty, free time before, you're busy. and I guess ultimately life before death. And that's a really good marker for us to really think about and consider, especially on a Friday when I'm sure, the afternoon is a bit more lax for most people. Maybe you're going to have time on the train, maybe you're going to have time in the car, whatever it needs to be. That, well, what advantage are we taking of our strength before, la qadar Allah would become sick? Or, this wealth that we're blessed with at the moment. So while we know that there's so many people really struggling to feed their kids, cost of living is through the roof. If we have an individual now that, it's not killing us right now, like we can still feed our families, we can still have a decent lunch, we still have means, when we know millions of people, 2 million people using food banks in the UK right now. If we're not one of those people, how are we thankful for that? How are we thankful for that? What are we doing about that? Because if that wealth that we have currently is allowing us to stay free from that, what could we do to support those people that are unable to be in that situation? A very practical thing I noticed recently, I was in a supermarket, and there was the chap in front of me. He was with his family, he had his wife and 2 kids, and his bill was, I think, 117, 120 pounds, something like this, which I'm sure for all of us is increasingly common. And when the lady told him the amount, he just paused and stopped, and he opened his wallet. He opened an envelope, and he paid the money. And I just remember he just looked at his wife and he said, "Man, that's like a week's work. That's like a week's work." And that was really horrifying, really sad, because the reality is there are many people that still work like that, where they are paid, very little for their time and their effort. So for all of us, it's a good time to really think about, what are we doing with our lives? What are we able to sacrifice? How are we able to illustrate to our own selves more than anyone else, to illustrate our faith and the integrity of that faith, and what value it brings to the universe? So that's just, something that I think is really important for us to really take some time and reflect. And there's no better time to do that than these days that we're upon. Like often, obviously, for most of us, we're just thinking, it's the 1st of July, it's another day. But ultimately, yeah, it's the 1st of July, but it's also the second day of the most blessed days of the year for of the Islamic calendar, Dhul Hijjah. It's the month in which the Hajj takes place, in which the greatest manifestation to the world, really, of the Islamic faith is showcased. And Ibn Abbas, one of the great companions of the Prophet, upon whom be peace, said, "There are no days in which righteous deeds are more beloved to Allah than these 10 days, i.e. the days that we're in now." And the people asked, "Not even jihad fi sabilillah?" And he said, "Not even that, except not even that." And this is a tradition that's mentioned in Bukhari. So we see that this idea of, doing good deeds in this month is seen to be, at the apex of the religion, bigger than any sacrifice that an individual offer for their faith. Doing good, being busy with good deeds in these blessed days is so important, because actually being able to make sacrifices, and this is something that we know, that this idea of jahada, which is to sacrifice, and to do that in so many ways, with your wealth, with your time, with your money, with everything that you can, to make life easier for people, to make life better for people, to make faith more accessible for people, is something that is so beloved. And that's why these 10 days are seen to be the days to busy yourself in good deeds. If you were to do a Google search of good things to do in Dhul Hijjah, you'll find every charity, every kind of Islamic organization will be talking about, look, increasing your fasting, increasing your charity, make sure you do a qurbani, make sure that you make time to visit sick relatives. Like anything that is venerated in the Islamic tradition, you'll find that people will be talking that in these 10 days, excel in doing that. And for people especially that are working people, it's a great time to start conversations about our tradition, and actually being able to share that in a time where, there is a lot more people interested. There's a lot more queries that people have about Islam and what is its value to civil society. And that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about, how much effort do we make and how much sacrifice do we make from our time to understand what is the value that we bring and the Islamic tradition brings to civil society, and also what is the value that is able to that we can bring to that situation. So, for example, we know that is something beautiful to do in these days, which is, to make charitable contribution. Obviously, everybody will benefit from that is in need. For example, visit a sick person. We know this is something that is blessed, both for the person that makes the time to visit a sick person, but also for the person that receives a sick person. They know if they've been by themselves all day and they've been struggling, and they need some shopping or whatever it needs to be. Making that time is something that's venerated, in our tradition, and especially in these days, and that's really important for us to consider. And as I kind of, I understand I've got a few minutes left, but as we kind of bring this together, I really want you to consider two important things. Number one is you'll be inundated with messages. You may have already paid, you may have already booked, but you'll be inundated with messages for you to follow the Abrahamic tradition of making a sacrifice, known as Qurbani or Udhiyah. Now, even if you were to think of this at the most simple level, at the most, just at a linguistic level, Qurbani or Udhiyah, it literally means to make sacrifice. But we live in a time of price wars. We live in a time where everything is a sale, and I'm sure in years to come, we'll probably have a Black Friday Qurbani deal as well, right? But you'll see deals that are on offer for like £25, £17, £29. And don't get me wrong, I understand what's going on there. There's there's people trying to acquire new customers in from the charity space, etc. But I'm saying just really take a step back and think, if you're paying for a Qurbani that involves no Qurbani, it's not really a Qurbani. Let me repeat myself there, that if you're paying for a Qurbani that involves no Qurbani, it's not really a Qurbani. And that's not to say that, you wouldn't get a reward for having paid for a cheap animal, don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that as people of means, as people that are working professionals and you have some means, just make sure it pinches a little bit, make sure it involves some sacrifice, don't go for the cheapest deal that's there. Look for a partner, look for a charity that's doing, that makes an effort, that isn't in a price war, it makes a deal about making sure that they have good animals, that they will sacrifice, and that those animals will be put to good use. So they have a program where they'll be canned and they'll be distributed to people that are, don't eat meat but once a year, for example, just because of Eid. But my point here is very simple, that make a Qurbani that feels a little bit, it gives you a little bit of a pinch. It feels like a Qurbani was done, because the only reason it's done is to follow in the tradition of the Prophet Abraham. His Qurbani was to put his son on the line. And he didn't do that, of course, because it was God's mercy, and he was able to sacrifice an animal, but he was willing. Now, what are we willing to do? I'm saying for us, God doesn't expect that from us. God expects us to give a good animal in sacrifice. So make sure you do give a good animal. Don't look for the cheapest deal. Look for the best one, the charity that gives you the most confidence. Think, actually, you know what? That's really good. And I know that's going to involve some pinch. It's going to involve me missing out. It's a few, it's a few £100 maybe. It's something that I've not normally spent. And I just want to draw on one thing. I went a few years ago to physically make the Qurbani for a charity, and I traveled with a gentleman who's very wealthy, and he has Lamborghinis, Ferraris, etc. And I remember we arrived in the farm where we were buying the animals, and we were purchasing, for maybe 100, 200 animals. I can't remember exactly, but I remember there was this very large black bull in the paddock, and as this gentleman walked in, he looked at it, he said, "I'll have that one." And I looked at him and said, "Why?" And he said, "It's clear that's by far the most expensive animal here." And it was a black bull. And he said, "I drive a Lamborghini, and it looks like the bull that's on there. And if I want to make a sacrifice, I want to do it in a way that's befitting what my means are." And he spent I think it was £600-700. I can't remember. It was a lot of money. It was like at least 2 or 3 times the price of a cow. But it was a reflection of his intent that if I'm going to do a, I want it to have, I want it to be real. I want it to be something that is more than the ordinary. So think about that, guys. If you're looking at it and you see these 20, £30 deals, if you've got means, maybe you want to spend that on lunch today, or maybe you'll spend it very easily on lunch. So just make sure it's a Qurbani, a proper one. And the second thing is really think about at a higher level, what kind of sacrifices you make in your life generally. How is your time spent away from work? How much time is just lost in, watching, I don't know, Sky Sports, or just lost in things that have no benefit apart from yourself. And I just want to finish on I have a friend who had a brain hemorrhage on Sunday, and someone that spends all his time basically as a community servant, helping people and just doing an insane amount of community work. And I was with his brother yesterday, and so they have his cell phone, and we were just looking at the just insane level of traction and interest in what's gone on with him because of how many lives he's touched. And his brother just showed me his cell phone. So from between Sunday and Thursday this week, he looked at the phone. There were 790 missed calls. 790 missed calls. There was literally hundreds, if not thousands, of messages from people. Obviously, the guy's got a brain tumor, brain hemorrhage. He's not responding to anything. But people are concerned, wanting to just reach out. And the diversity of people interested in his health and praying for him was insane. And it literally is from the Mufti of the Haram in Mecca to the Bishop of Bradford. and like literally from the Christian tradition to the Islamic tradition, people of interest in hoping and wishing that he's well. Why? Come back to the same thing, because he's a person that lived his life and lives his life making sacrifices and giving from his time and his wealth to help other people. And I'll finish with a wonderful tradition of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He said, whoever relieves the hardship of a believer in this world, Allah will relieve his hardship on the day of resurrection. And whoever helps ease one in difficulty, Allah will make it easy for him in this world and hereafter. So just ask yourself how much you're able to relieve people of difficulties in this world, and do that with the view that God will do the same with you in the hereafter. That's all I wanted to share with you today. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I don't know how these calls generally finish, but that's all I have to have today.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Azim. Thank you very much for taking out time from your busy schedule. I normally do tie it up at the end to finish the session. You told us about the benefits of sacrifices, how we attach and understand value that we bring, and take opportunities to develop relationship with Allah. You define levels of sacrifice, and then we talk about the ultimate example of Ibrahim alayhi salam, whose son was prepared to take the ultimate sacrifice. I love the take advantage of 5 before 5. Can you remind us what the 5 before 5 was, just so we can take note?
Yeah, is that for the is that for me to answer?
Yes, please.
Is that a pop quiz for your?
That could be a pop quiz, but we don't really open up the floor because we have short time. That's back
okay, no
to
worries.
you, sir.
So the hadith which mentions take advantage 5 before 5 is very simple. It says take advantage 5 before 5, your youth before your old age, your health before your sickness, your riches before your poverty, your free time before your busyness at your work, and finally your life before your death.
SubhanAllah. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I did take note, and I almost missed the riches one. So further, you reminded us of 2 important things with regards to sacrifice, which is really important, I believe. I think when you are sacrificing and you're paying for a qurbani, for example, is it a real sacrifice? You ask yourself the question, I'm paying for a sacrifice, but is it a sacrifice for me? And it's something for us and for people to think about. Jazakallah khair for your time. Really appreciate it. Just leaves me a little bit of time to remind you of our events coming up. We have the summer Eid dinner tour around nationwide. We have it in London, Birmingham, Manchester, and Glasgow. The link is in the chat. It's been shared right at the beginning. Please have a look. muslimsinrail.org/Eid dinner. Book your tickets. This limited supply. It's a perfect opportunity for friends, colleagues to get together post-lockdown, enjoy some food, enjoy some company with each other. So just like, please keep supporting our events, just like you've supported us for fundraising for Mercy Mission and the New Dawn Project, helping Muslim refugees build better lives in the UK. We're really grateful for that. Keep an eye out for our newsletters. Are there any questions in the chat? Just double checking. Lots of dua for Shadim Hussain, CEO, from the CEO for Foster Family. Yeah, so no other questions. Jazakallah khair. I will now draw this webinar to a close. Thank you all for joining us. It leaves me to say Eid Mubarak to everybody in advance. May these 10 days of Dhul Hijjah be blessed for all of us. Until the next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.